got my coffee, got my laptop, I got my microphone here. Okay, YouTube, what do you have for me today?
I can't believe it's 2016.
I mean, do you guys think this is? You think this is a game? You think is this funny to you? Am I amusing? Like, it's just great. It's current year.
Look, feminism isn't about hating men. It simply isn't.
You know what? Let's take that to be true. Let's say that feminism has absolutely nothing to do with hating men. I'll allow that as a presupposition. I have so many questions, though. Is feminism a guard against hating men? Are feminists unable to hate men, simply due to what I presume will be your definition of feminism, which is the equality of the sexes? I don't think they're unable. It's possible to want equality for people you hate simply on principle, I guess. You know, we'll see. Let's continue.
By saying that it is, you're misrepresenting feminism and not allowing for rational discourse to take place.
Mansplaining is a thing, thanks to feminism and numerous feminists. I mean, I'm all for rational discourse taking place, but it's slightly difficult to do when my opinion is mocked simply because it leaked out of the mouth of a man. What am I supposed to do in this situation as a guy? If that isn't an example of prejudice based on gender, I don't know what is. And if you don't think that is prejudice based on gender, then you're mentally terminal. And if you think prejudice based on gender is acceptable behavior from a feminist, then you kinda shot yourself in both of your feet.
This is a logical fallacy called a straw man.
Oh my god. Okay, so you send me someone who uses the 2016 argument and busts out straw man in the first minute of the video. I hope my misery entertains you.
When you say that feminists hate men, you make yourself sound reasonable because you don't hate men.
It's pretty reasonable to not hate men. Plus, you swapped from feminism is about hating men and feminists hate men. It's a demonstrable fact that feminists hate men. Feminists write in The Guardian, Salon, and various other publications about how horrid men are. All you're doing now is damage control for your particular pet label. Look at the followings those publications and authors have as well. And look at how praise is showered on them by feminists. Prominent feminists actively hate men. So forgive the people who think feminism is about hating men because they're simply going off of pattern recognition.
But here's the thing, neither do I, and neither do most feminists.
Debatable.
But you see how I said most? That must be proof that some feminists hate men, right?
It's implied linguistically, yes.
Well, yeah, sure, probably, somewhere.
Don't act like you've never seen these people before, okay? Anita Sarkeesian, Steph Guthrie, Lori Penny, Clementine Ford, Lacey Green, certain members of Parliament. I know more about what feminists are saying than you do, apparently. Wait a minute. How do you define hate?
You see, feminism isn't an organization. We don't have meetings, we don't have leaders, we don't have rules for membership.
Oh, so it's about nothing. And you have no authority to tell us what it is and isn't about. It's just a label you slap on yourselves that showcases to the world, hey look, I'm one of the good, upright, moral people.
If someone wants to call themselves a feminist while doing things that I would 100% consider not feminist,
like hate men,
they're well within their rights to do so.
It's not about being within their rights. There is no criteria for being a feminist, huh? It's a useless label then. It describes everyone. Why is it still around? It's like walking around calling yourself a human being. Everyone is one. It's just a fact. Oh. That's where this is going?
But feminism as a whole doesn't hate men.
Anyone with any belief system can legitimately call themselves a feminist. Therefore, everyone is a feminist. And therefore, since the majority of people don't hate men, feminism as a whole doesn't hate men. Yay for feminism! What is this?
By its very definition, seeking equality and justice on the basis of gender, sexuality, and race, feminism isn't about hating men.
You tell us that you have no rules for membership. You have zero ability to tell us who is and isn't a feminist. Yet, you revert to the dictionary as proof that feminism isn't about hating men. And you also dish out a straw man accusation. Now, a straw man is when you misrepresent a position. According to you, a few seconds ago in your video, there are no rules for membership. It's very rich that you're calling straw man when you can't even properly represent a position. You can tell us what it definitely isn't about, and you revert to the dictionary to tell us what it is. all the while saying that there are no rules in regards to being or not being a feminist. It's like you're trying to confuse people. I've dealt with this type of thing before. You say two contradictory things, then when someone tries to get a grasp on your position, you bleat straw man and cite position 1, then when they argue against position 1, you yell straw man again, and then cite position 2. It's the intellectual equivalent of a rusty seesaw. It's annoying.
But maybe you get confused when we talk about things that relate to being a man.
Ah, so you don't hate the sinner, you just hate the sin. No, I get it. No, it's fine.
There are a few concepts that we regularly critique and argue against, and it's possible that some of those could be misconstrued as being against men.
Yeah, like toxic masculinity, right? I mean, I have no idea how that could be misconstrued as being against men. I'm only saying that there's something toxic about a part of you that I'm making sweeping assumptions about because you're a man.
So today, I want to break down a few of those concepts. First up is toxic masculinity.
You have got to be kidding me.
Which is a phrase that refers to all of the negative aspects of our culture's definition of masculinity.
Quick question. Are there any positive aspects of masculinity in your mind? I mean, I'll accept one.
So basically, when you're raised as a man in our society...
Yeah, don't misconstrue this as being about men. I mean, they're only talking about how every single man in today's society is being raised as a man and how it's toxic. I mean, don't go strawmanning them now.
You're raised with certain ideas about what it means to be a man.
And what were those ideas? Please tell me more about the personal lives of millions of men you don't know, while maintaining the idea that you're not being prejudiced against men. Generally, whenever I hear feminists discussing society, it's really just a ghost villain they use to say whatever they like about men. They're not talking about men, they're just talking about how society molds men into evil, disgusting, toxic monsters. It's how they get out of accusations of sexism.
And some of those are very harmful.
Such as?
Toxic masculinity asserts that for men to be considered men, they have to be violent.
Laws against assault?
Aggressive.
Do you mean aggressive as in hostile, or aggressive as in assertive? Two different things.
Dominant.
I think men are just, on average, naturally dominant.
Angry.
Is this what you think men are like?
And never cry or show emotions.
If you want a personal story about how I was raised, I wasn't shamed for crying or showing emotion by my father. He didn't say, suck it up, quit crying and acting like a girl or anything like that. He was more pragmatic about it. He would say, look, crying is not going to solve your problems. Whatever you're upset about right now, your time would be better spent solving it as opposed to crying about it. It didn't have anything to do with being a man. But, of course, we have the ad hoc response to that too. Your dad isn't the whole of society. Yeah, we could find 149 million examples of sons being raised in a non-toxic environment, according to you, and it still technically wouldn't be the whole of society. There could be one toxic environment that exists, and as long as you can cite to that one example, you'll still think society believes what you want it to believe, because you need an excuse to bash men.
Toxic masculinity assumes all men to be potential rapists.
Are you saying that people who assume all men are potential rapists are participating in toxic masculinity? I see what's going on here. You're trying to deflect blame. Who came out with Schrodinger's rapist? Feminists, who say consistently that women are terrified to walk to their cars at night for fear of being raped or sexually assaulted by a man. Feminists, who consistently say that men need to be taught not to rape. Feminists. But no, there's no way that feminists said those terrible things. It's just how we raise men to think. You just equated feminism with toxic masculinity, but you don't realize you did. This shores up my base assertion about feminism more than I could possibly have imagined. Feminism is the patriarchy. Feminism is toxic masculinity. You are members of the group perpetuating the things you hope to fight against. Buy a mirror. Introspect a little.
By saying that a woman who was dressed a certain way was asking for it, as if men can't resist the temptation to rape someone when they see a little bit of skin.
Nearly all men don't have the temptation to rape someone when they see a little bit of skin. I'm going to say this one time and I hope it sticks. Desiring someone sexually is not the same as the desire to rape them. Men actually want to be desired back. Crazy concept, I know. I'm not saying that this person holds that stance. It's entirely possible they were being sarcastic, but I still thought it was worth saying.
It also assumes all men to be straight. You've probably heard someone say that they became a man after they first had sex with a woman. And not wanting to have sex with women means people will probably say you're not really a man.
Okay, I'm going to hone in on the only glob of glue that holds this argument together.
Probably.
You start off with the conclusion that toxic masculinity, which is what men in our society are taught is what defines masculinity, assumes all men to be straight. Your supporting statements consist of, and I quote, "You've probably heard someone say they became a man after they had sex with a woman, and not wanting to have sex with women means people will probably say you're not really a man," unquote. Let me flesh out the reasoning here. You probably heard someone say they became a man after they had sex with a woman. People will probably say you're not really a man for not wanting to have sex with women. Therefore, our society assumes all men to be straight. How does one combat this line of reasoning? There are lots of the word probably in there, so any reasonable amount of counterexamples can be just tossed aside because they said probably. Notice how the conclusion is 100% concrete, but the premises are fluid. You can't pin down the premises, but it all definitely leads to a concrete conclusion. Allow me to draw a parallel. You probably heard someone say something mean about your mom. People will probably say that you're just a mama's boy for defending her. Therefore, our society assumes all men hate their mothers. Can you see the disconnect? They take an isolated incident in someone's life and then project it onto the whole of society, and all of it is filtered and defended through the word probably. Honestly, it's genius. It's magnificent in its deception, but still ultimately a bad argument. Oh, and P.S., the vast majority of men are straight.
This is bad for everyone. It's bad for women and other gender minorities who are often the victims of toxic masculinity-fueled violence.
Women and other gender minorities. I'm going to assume that you aren't talking about men. This is the problem. This is why people think feminists hate men. You say, it's bad for everyone, hold on. Let me make sure I mention women and other people, but not men, because men are the violent ones.
And it's bad for rape survivors who are blamed for what happened to them.
And men do that, women never do that. That's toxic masculinity. And if women do that, it's still toxic masculinity, because bad stuff is masculine and good stuff is feminine. Oh, God, I didn't think I was supposed to say that.
And it's harmful to men because it limits who they are allowed to be.
Like rapists, right?
We know that there are men who don't want to be violent and aggressive, but lash out because it's the manly thing to do.
And who do they lash out against? Those men who would rather not do that. I'm pretty sure that no one is saying to them, "Hey, Jimmy, you need to be violent towards this woman in order to be a man." If anything, they'd be encouraged to be violent towards one another. Statistics back me up on this. Men who just lash out at women violently for no legitimate reason are not treated as respectable men for that action.
We know that men should be able to cry and show their emotions.
Yeah, it's because feminists get thirsty when we don't.
We know that men can be gay or bisexual or pansexual. By identifying toxic masculinity as the problem that it is... Yes, I agree. Assuming all men to be potential rapists is a problem. We hope to open up even more avenues for men to be masculine in non-toxic ways.
How? I haven't heard one example of something positive about masculinity from a modern feminist. They don't think there's anything positive about masculinity.
Second is the patriarchy, the big scary word that's always associated with feminism.
I wonder why. I mean, I am just racking my brain.
Patriarchy, in its simplest form, is a social system where men hold the most power. In our society, that's obvious in a bunch of different ways. A majority of elected officials being men.
Elected officials, huh? Who elects them? Are some of the voters women? Are most of them women? It's like for a split second, whenever a feminist brings up this point, they forget what an election actually entails. And then you bring up elections and they say, well, duh, women vote in elections. That's how elections work. Don't insult my intelligence. Okay, well, since you concede that, men wouldn't have that majority of power if it weren't for women's voting power. Clank, crunch, societal attitudes, internalized misogyny. That's how that works. You can tell the clanking and crunching in their brain is going on by the 5-second silence and face clenching that presents itself.
All of the presidents ever being men.
Women assist in electing presidents too. I mean, are we serious?
And most major CEOs being men, etc., etc.
What happens if there are majority women CEOs? What happens if the majority of political power is given to women? Or earned by women? Is this equality or a matriarchy? Because if it is equality to you, then you have a bug in your mental framework. I don't think it would be a matriarchy if those things occurred naturally and through merit. Same with men. You're complaining about a majority of power earned by men. Yet, in order to be consistent and not prejudiced, the only way you can be happy is a forced 50-50 split everywhere. And to do that would involve suppressing choice and being, pardon the word, oppressive.
When feminists talk about dismantling the patriarchy or destroying the patriarchy, we aren't talking about destroying men. We're talking about achieving equality through justice.
We're not talking about destroying men. We're talking about achieving equality through justice, which means that justice needs to be dished out in order to make these male CEOs, politicians, and anything else lose their jobs to satiate my obsessive need for an exact 50-50 split. But don't worry, we'll do it by not discriminating based on sex. Somehow. So yeah, we aren't destroying men, just their livelihoods, because we don't like their particular demographic infesting that livelihood too much. No big deal, no prejudice going on here.
Since the patriarchy is a system where men are considered superior, we should all want to destroy the patriarchy.
I thought it was just a system where men held the most power. I mean, god damn it. I spent all this time making an argument against your original point. I crafted it very carefully. Yet after it's done, you turn around and you say, yeah, well, since the patriarchy is a system where men are considered superior, no. Be consistent. Have a distinct definition. I'd like to have some rational discourse, but that's impossible when my opponent keeps defining their terms differently based on convenience.
Fighting the patriarchy isn't fighting men.
It's just getting them fired?
It's fighting inequality.
By getting them fired?
And wanting to live in a world
where men are fired? I mean, you can't get around what your policy prescriptions require.
Where we're on an equal playing field to men. And maybe that sounds scary because you have to give up some power.
That's right, men. We aren't advocating that you lose your job or lose your fairly elected political seat. We just want to take your power.
Because if you're at the top of an unequal system,
haven't proven it's unequal,
you do have more power than those below you.
Here's something that you may not be ready to hear. If you are at the top of a fair and equal system, you also have more power than those below you. And I don't mean below you as in worth as a human being, just below you in amount of power over other people. Can you separate those two things? Because you desperately need to.
But just imagine what it's like for women and other gender minorities to live in this world every day without that power.
I'm sure a homeless guy thinks about Hillary Clinton and opines to his homeless compatriots on how he has more power than she does, and what a horrid scenario it must be to be her living in this world as a woman. Yeah, specific individual cases do blow your entire case out of the water when you make such sweeping, unscientific generalizations about men and women. Here's what I'm getting at. Men don't gain power through osmosis via being the same sex as most politicians.
Third is gender roles.
Oh, they never go stale, do they?
Which you've pretty clearly seen laid out if you've ever been to a toy store. Blue is for boys, pink is for girls. Guns, tanks, and cars are for boys. Dolls, flowers, and makeup are for girls.
Of course, that's what's doing it. There's no way that toy companies separated these specific toys into different sections to make it easier to find at their establishment. They shouldn't color code anything. They should mix the Barbies in with the tanks to make all of their merchandise very difficult to find. There's no reason a toy store should notice trends in what toys boys and girls happen to like and organize accordingly. Do you think toy stores are the ones who started the idea that girls like flowers and makeup and boys like tanks and cars?
Gender roles, at their core, are completely arbitrary.
That's incorrect. Scientifically incorrect. Biologically incorrect. At their core, they stem from what make men and women different biologically. After that, culture can influence whatever it can influence. No one got together in a meeting and devised gender roles for men and women, though.
Pink used to be considered a masculine color, and blue used to be considered a feminine color, but that switched sometime around the 30s or 40s.
I expected as much. You give an example of something that is arbitrary, which color is considered masculine or feminine, and say, yep, there you go. Gender roles just as arbitrary. Okay, now explain why men have made up the vast majority of the hard labor force for the entirety of the human species. What has just arbitrarily placed them in that role?
Other things we associate with gender, like makeup, dresses, or short hair, are equally made up. And this goes beyond material possession. Gender roles tell us how to act and behave. In that way, they're very closely linked with toxic masculinity. Men are supposed to be dominant.
Okay, you're just repeating yourself at this point. If you want to watch this section of the video, please go to the link in the description, but I'm skipping. I'm skipping this part.
So when we say that we want to destroy gender roles, it doesn't mean we want to stop you from being a man. You're free to be whatever you want. We just want you to be able to decide what being a man means for you.
What if someone thinks being a man means being aggressive and dominant? Look, you can't say certain attitudes about masculinity are toxic and then say, we just want you to make your own choices about masculinity. You've already determined that some choices are toxic.
Rather than strictly adhering to arbitrary and oppressive gender roles.
You don't want people to adhere to oppressive gender roles, yet you want a forced 50-50 gender split in politics and the workforce. I mean, brava.
Fourth is sexism, which you've definitely heard of.
I have. I was called a sexist by some feminists I was criticizing on the level of their ideas. I mean, crazy.
Sexism is the institutionalized discrimination against a gender or genders. Because it has to be institutionalized.
There it is. There's the failsafe. Feminists do or say something sexist? Sorry, it isn't, because it isn't institutionalized. What qualifies as an institution? Does the university qualify? Does the government qualify? I mean, because I'll have you know, it's illegal to circumcise infant girls, but legal to do that to infant boys. Does this count? Can women be sexist towards men yet? Or are we restricted to some vague, fluid notion of social systems?
That is built into our societal systems.
Oh, societal systems. I was close.
You can only be sexist against women or other gender minorities. Yeah, there are people who will argue that you can be sexist against men, but that's an unnecessarily defensive argument over semantics. Does sexism require institutional backing? I would say yes, and because of that, only gender minorities, including women, face sexism, while men can still face discrimination.
I live in woe. I am the prince of semantics. Let's take a hypothetical scenario. Someone, a woman, says all men are scum. I mean, that's a prejudiced statement. It's a discriminatory statement. It presupposes that all men, based on their sex alone, are awful people. Oh, there was that word sex. Let's tuck that away for later. And believing that a sex is completely scum based on that fact is a pretty harmful philosophy, if I do say so myself. Oh, distinct philosophy. There's our suffix, ism, sexism. Oh, it's seamless. But I mean, it's directed towards men, so that doesn't count anymore. That is, in itself, sexist. I could just stick to semantics, but I'm not going to. I'm going to get a bit more serious now. You accused people, calling out sexist behavior towards men as being defensive and playing semantic games. This means that a woman could say to a man's face, all men are scum, and if he says, quit being sexist, I'm not scum, you are perfectly fine with that woman accusing him of being defensive. You are laying the groundwork for a situation where women can demonize men as much as they please and then laugh at men for holding up a shield. Because they're men. You will not succeed in making your sexism less bad by hiding behind the euphemism of prejudice or discrimination. I won't allow it to happen. Sexism against women in regards to the law would be rightfully sexism to you. However, when sexism towards men is enshrined in law, that doesn't count as institutional backing. You're a bigot. And you won't ever see it.
If you say no, then you think everyone can face sexism.
You say that as if it's a ridiculous sentiment. Yes, anyone can face sexism.
Like I said, arguing about this isn't very useful.
Then maybe stop trying so hard to make sexism against men an unthought.
And only serves to deny that there's institutionalized gender discrimination.
You're denying that there's institutionalized gender discrimination that harms men. And you're using semantic games to deny it. Seriously, I'll send you a coupon for a mirror. Listen to yourself talk. Focus on what you're saying. You're accusing people of doing what you are currently doing.
What I mean by that is how sexism is baked into the very foundation of everything that we do. It's how most characters in any show or a movie are men.
Lie.
It's how women are catcalled and harassed on the streets daily.
Happens to men too, daily.
And it's how women are paid less than men for doing the same work.
And another lie.
When we say that we hate sexism, we mean that we hate how discrimination so negatively affects us.
By us, you mean people who aren't men, right? Because men can't face that.
This doesn't mean that we hate men or that all men are sexist. It just means that we hate the discriminatory actions against us.
perpetrated by... I mean, come on. It's men. You mean men.
Fifth is male privilege, which goes hand in hand with sexism. If sexism is the idea that gender minorities are at a disadvantage, male privilege is the idea that men are at an advantage.
Is there an idea that exists on the planet where men are at a disadvantage in relation to women? Is that even possible? Is there a word for that?
Now, that's not to say that all men have it better than everyone else. You also need to account for class, race, ability, and all of that. But in general, if women are losing out, men are gaining something from that.
There's another problem in your worldview. If women lose something, men gain, and if men gain something, women lose. I think there's a quote that is said to have been said by Thomas Sowell. He said, "When people get used to special treatment, equal treatment feels like discrimination."
Obviously, if you're a man, that's not your fault. You didn't create the system that we're in. But you do benefit from male privilege. When you're loud and demanding, you're more likely to be called strong than bossy.
Actually, I'll be more likely to be called an asshole.
You can walk down the street without having to worry about catcallers.
Women don't have to worry about catcallers. It's not a requirement. What is there to worry about anyway? Some stranger said something risque to you? I mean, I get it, it's rude, but what's there to worry about? Either confront that person or just move on with your life. If you worry about people saying crude things to you constantly, then frankly you shouldn't leave your house or engage in conversation. Believe it or not, women are not as weak as you seem to think they are.
You can dress how you want or sleep with who you want, and you won't be called a slut.
Man whore is a term. Do you think women view men who sleep around in a positive light? I'm sick of this crap. It's like arguing with a mean girl-esque high schooler whenever you engage with feminists that act like this. You bring up a legal disparity that hurts men and they say, yeah, well, I was called a slut and like nobody can judge me for me. I was just doing me. Why is it when Brad slept with Samantha and Jennifer, his best friend said, nice one, what a pig, what a gross pig. It's so vacant. But hey, people still believe it's a credible line of argumentation.
Having male privilege doesn't make you a bad person, and we don't hate you for it, but you do need to be able to recognize it.
And then quit your job. I'm gonna keep coming back to this, it's too good.
And lastly, there's misogyny, the hatred of women. This is very similar to sexism in that it's used to talk about things that are harmful to women, but I feel like misogyny has more anger behind it. But I think what really trips people up is that they don't want to be branded a misogynist. Because you can definitely do or say misogynistic things without necessarily being a misogynist.
This is what they actually believe.
We're all constantly growing and evolving, and we're all raised with misogynistic ideas in our head.
Everyone is by default misogynist. You know, there are some things that I think are self-refuting, that need no real input from me. So, I'm gonna leave that statement, I'm just gonna let it sit there.
So yeah, sometimes we're going to say or think misogynistic things. But when someone says, hey, what you just said is misogynistic, they're not saying, you're a terrible person who hates women. They're just saying that what you said contributes to the hatred of women, so maybe you should reconsider it. Hating misogyny means standing up to things that degrade or demean women, and oftentimes men feel like it's their right to be able to treat women like that.
It's time.
Hating misogyny means standing up to things that degrade or demean women, and oftentimes men feel like it's their right to be able to treat women like that. And oftentimes men feel like it's their right to be able to degrade or demean women. You're a terrible person. Men degrade or demean women. Hating misogyny means standing up to men. Hating misogyny means hating men, and oftentimes men degrade, men demean. Men hate women. Men hate women.